behavior, like what Santosh is saying about what needs to happen, we can model it. You know, you can ask people, so who needs a last authorship here who's part of this paper? You know? Great talk, Santosh, thank you. Okay, so how to engage the computer sciences and creatives in mHealth research, my version, coming from, all these little pictures are in my way. There we go, I'm moving you. All right. The engineering professionals, okay, so my working definition of that for this talk is schools of engineering, computer fields, computational fields, possibly ethics. And then, because there's a lot of different, there's no such thing as computer science and engineering. There's a lot of different schools and different expertise there. So as a health scientist, the first time I did any mHealth, I had like 6 engineers on the team because I didn't know what I needed, and they all did different things. So that's one thing to know. And my working definition of creatives are game design, illustration, animation, artwork. Don't forget that you're also going to need these people, and that they're also going to, if you're doing an app, you want it to look nice, right? And then another important part of who you're going to be working with are patients, participants, community. I mean, unless you're building solutions, technologies, interventions exclusively for yourself, no, then you need experiential expertise, which I was really pleased to see in many of the presentations today that showed up. So piloting your interventions or your apps or anything else just on your grad students is not going to cut it. It's not enough. I used to say everyone's a behaviorist, and I didn't mean that kindly. But you know what? It turned out to be true in a way. Everyone has a mental model of the trajectory of whatever behavior you're studying, everyone. And you need to get them all out in the open. So Santosh, who is like doubly dangerous now because he's been working with us types for so long, he's got a mental model in his head of how shit works. And if you don't get it out in time, bad things can happen to good people, like some of the things that Bonnie told us the other day, you know, where you just, there's a disconnect between what you think you're doing and what somebody from another discipline, or even somebody from your same discipline, thinks you're doing. So we need to get everyone's mental model on the table of how stuff works. This can take a lot of time, but everyone needs to be engaged. So this storming and norming has to happen with the entire team, and you really need to respect the opinions of people around you. And also you will get to see the misunderstandings, like we'll talk about vocabulary in a while. But, you know, when I say self-management skills, I have something very specific in mind because I know that literature. But when we were working with an new to us engineering student who had something entirely different in mind, but we were saying the same words. And since he was developing the computational part of this model, things went wrong. Which behaviors are we talking about? Which determinants, which measurements? What's the correct timing for measuring those? If you have misunderstandings about that, you can sink your project. So for instance, we were doing this project on eating events. And we decided we were going to call it eating events. And eating events were hand-to-mouth situations. We were doing it with a accelerometer so that we could recognize eating events. Now, is that a meal? Is it a snack? Is it a bite? There are whole papers on this. And if you don't decide what it is ahead of time, so what happened was we were talking about eating events, but we were thinking about bites. The engineers were talking about eating events, but they need a number of bites before they're going to say this is an eating event, right? And there's a margin of error. So not every bite is necessarily a true bite, but if you get enough of them together, it's an eating event. So if you're trying to look at mimicry between mother and daughter and eating, and you're using bites, that's not going to work with their algorithms because that's not what they measured. but we were using the same words. So getting out these mental models out, what leads to what, and talking about it, not only is it actually really fun, you learn new things from your colleagues just because you've read the articles on, for instance, self-management skills. You know, the insights from people that are not in the field are brilliant. So engagement means for the life of the project, not just hiring somebody at the beginning. You need everybody's engagement at all levels at every stage. If you don't have that kind of buy-in, things will not go well. So from the conceptualization of the intervention, don't just leave it to the interventionists, have the whole team in on it. People from other fields have brilliant ideas, and also they know the limitations of their own field, because I have techno joy. And I always think Santosh can do anything. And then he reminds me they're going to be bugs. And I'm like, surprised. I'm still surprised. So involve everyone in the team in conceptualization, building, pilot testing, engagement and use, whatever that means. Is it fun? Do you like it? Engagement in targeted behaviors. So what does that mean? So if I'm promoting physical activity, and let's say my goal is that you get to 10,000 steps a day, and I'm using an app, right? An app and some measurement tool. And you get to 10,000 steps a day and you stop using the app because you don't really need it anymore. Is that bad or is that good? And engagement with the intervention. This is the same thing. All of these things, everybody needs to be involved in their team and thinking about it. It is really a lot more fun. It's just a little bit slower. It's a partnership every step of the way between people who don't share languages. So this comes to what Santosh already touched on, the Tower of Babel problem. When I first went from psychology into medical ethics, my first lunch with the medical ethics department, and the chair of the department was talking about his experiments. And I went, whoa, that's great. I didn't think ethicists did experiments. And it took a long time before I realized what he was talking about was mind experiments, thinking experiments that he did with himself. It's like, okay, we're talking about very different things here. This requires all of this for a project like you put together with mobile health and new technologies. It requires mutual involvement at every phase. Let's talk about students. Students are the inverted Matryoshka doll models. Assume that your students will grow to know more than you did. So you guys already know more than I do, and your students will know more than you do. So instead of getting, when you take out the Matryoshka dolls and they get smaller, 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 this is building, building, building. This is like making your pie bigger, but it's a mini layered doll. They are the next layers, and their students are the next layers, ad infinitum. And I am CHO, in my current humble opinion. A lasting collaboration that develops on your watch between students from different disciplines is the biggest boost to scientific discovery. If you see in your projects, like right now in a project that I'm doing with Peja and Eric and Daniel and Ben and Misha, we have an engineering student from Daniel's lab and a behaviorist from my lab. They are going to be a lifelong team, and they're carrying the project right now. And that, to me, is how we move the science forward. It's amazing. Okay, last thing, the uncomfortable business of hurry up and wait. It's all about taking turns in these projects. Like Santosh was touching on when he talked about when you use the different data and when you get to publish. For many projects, the technologists or the computer scientists, sorry, Santosh, that's one slide, I forgot to change that on. The computer scientists and engineers, the HCI people, for many projects, their work is up front. Behaviorists and participants play an important role in development, but it's more advisory on this part of the journey. If you're lucky, if you've got a good team, then you're talking and you're getting to advise. It's not always academically rewarding. rewarding upfront, unless you're really doing that norming and storming and moving your thoughts forward. But you've got to be patient and you've got to think creatively. Because when you go out into the field, behaviorists, clinicians, public health folks, they take the lead. And technologists might have a more of a maintenance role, which is absolutely not academically rewarding. So think about this up front, keep people involved. One way to do that is to make sure that the data that you're bringing in is that to understand that partial data is fine in computer science. It's great, as a matter of fact, and what the computer science and engineering people can do with partial data sets is move the ideas forward that you then build on in the bigger papers, in the meaning bigger data set papers. This scenario, by the way, looks very different when you engage in a company, and there are a lot of trade-offs, but that's a whole different talk, and I'm not going to give it right now. Email me all the time. There are no stupid questions. And basta. Well, that was fun. Any questions, you guys? Or are you all just like ready to die from so much?
I have a general question. Can you hear me? Yeah. How do you weed out your students? I would imagine you get so many emails of people who want to be involved in your work. Do you have any advice on how to manage that?
Yeah, have somebody do it that's better at that crap than me. I have, you know, my secret weapon along those lines is my project specialists and project managers. They are the ones who have to work with these people often more than me. So they do the interviews. They do the first weeding out because they know more than I do along those lines. They know what they're looking for. They're often, I tend to hire what we fondly name M-kittens. Those are people that are finished with undergrad and they're taking 2 years to do their MCATs. Those are my M-kittens. My daughter's a doctor. So I like to have them, they're great, they're dedicated, and then they go. And so the students are often closer to their age. They see all the things that I don't see. They see all the tricks that I miss, you know, so that's how I do it. If you're talking about postdocs or PhD students who want to join the lab, I do that myself. But for any others, for undergraduates and even graduate students that want to come in for a brief time, I leave it to my staff. They're better at it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, it definitely answers the question. Thank you.
I have a related follow-up question, Donna, about like how to help students with writing. I feel like that's a struggle I have personally a lot, is I feel I'm rewriting a lot of papers, and definitely it's good for them, you know, to take lead and do the first part. And I try to give them like examples of what I wrote even, you know, at time of submission, to even a Word document with all references, and maybe about how to write. But I feel like until you get into the weed and start writing and get feedback, sometimes there's a lot of variability, and it just, I'm not sure if there is really like an advice that you have on that.
So I have found on that, and Bonnie can probably say some interesting things here too, but I found that a little bit of time up front will save you a lot of work the rest of the time. So first papers with my students, first and second papers, we tend to just sit down together and go and write it together. So they give the first draft, and then I sit with them and I go through everything, every sentence. And I say, that's a great sentence, or this doesn't make any sense. Do you know why? And if I asked you to do this, that, and the other, what would you then do? I mean, I just walk them through. And then they're pretty much cured. First of all, that's a lot of time. It takes a couple hours. And I find that really helps. Just people need experiential. You know, if you send them stuff, here's a good, you know, primer on writing. It's just, it doesn't really help. So it's a lot of sitting there with them, but.
Thank you. That's pretty helpful. I think you're right about like going one by one and develop their skills and make sure they understand why and then that's just going to be like, the symptoms will be applied. So, okay.
And while you're doing that, before that, I don't know, maybe have a drink. If you're like me, at some point you get really impatient. You don't want to do that. You want to be loving and open, and don't. Well, I've found it's better if I don't give them the solution right then, but if I say, okay, this sounds weird to me, and here's why, and how might you change that? Just think of it as poetry, helping somebody write a poem. I hope that helps. Any other questions for me or for Santosh?
I have a question. So I'm coming from the HCI perspective, so the technology perspective. If someone reaches out to you with interest in collaborating or even just exploring potential for collaborations, who's from the technology side, what are some things that they could do to make those initial conversations productive? Or maybe you can talk also about potential pitfalls or mistakes people make in those early conversations.
Whoa. Well, if you're reaching out to me from HCI, I'll take you. Any discussion, because we need that. I'm trying to think of a really failed conversation. I can think of a few. I've been approached by people who don't necessarily want to work with me, but they just want my name on it. And that's hurtful. Or they come to me with already completely fully baked ideas and what they're going to do, and they would like to plug me in. And when I was more junior, I was like, sure, plug me in. And it's by now it's like, don't even try. So, I guess it's really kind of a mutual respect thing, that you come to me just like I would come to you with respect. When I was first approaching engineers, it was like a service field. I need a thing. Can you make it for me? This is also not going to work. And it's not what you need. So mutual respect. Santosh, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, in a similar vein, but another way to think about it is, if you write to someone, think hard about what's in it for them. So if they work with you, how does it help them? How does it connect to either their current interest? How does it help with impact that they can have? So that email should, or that initial conversation should be directed mostly about the recipient.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's like the first thing that I told my daughter when she was doing her interviews for medical school is, ask the person who's interviewing you what they like about the program. So get them talking, and then they'll love you. People like to talk about themselves. Present company, of course, excluded. Julian?
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. This is a question for both of you potentially, but I'm wondering what you see as the future profile of mHealth researchers. So are people going to remain grounded in their particular non-mHealth domain and then sort of develop interest in mHealth? Or do you think we're going to start seeing people trained to sort of have a lot more of the components all together in one person?
Oh, faceplant. Okay, I'm going to answer this, and then I want Santosh's opinion. mHealth, first of all, I don't believe in mHealth as a thing. After about another 4 years, I think everything will be mHealth. So, I mean, when we coined that phrase, Santosh was first author on that article when we coined that phrase. And I thought this phrase will live for maybe 20 years, and then everything's going to be mobile health. So it's kind of great. No, I don't think you can become me any more than I can become you. We will be better at speaking one another's languages. I will know much better than I used to what you can and can't do, and how I can help you, what you need from me. So what, everybody's a behaviorist. Everybody's got a theory. I know exactly how I want my data modeled, but I can't do it. So no, I don't think we're all going to become one another. I think we're going to become much more skilled at communicating with one another. And we better damn well learn how to do team science. Hey, Bonnie Spring, yes. Santosh.
Thank you, Donna. So if you think about it as to why do so many disciplines exist, it's because when the new generation comes up, they are naturally gravitated or naturally interested or passionate about a particular area. Somebody likes math and they just love math. Somebody enjoys a stat and that's what they become great at. Somebody enjoys patient care and thinking about that, and that's what they become great at. Somebody else enjoys creating new technology or thinking about new technology, and that's what they become skilled at. So mHealth by itself is what can we do to assess and improve someone's health and wellness in their natural mobile environment, which uses some of the technologies, but the goal is that we help help users take care of themselves or take care of their health in their natural field environment outside of any of the settings. And so to do that, there is a lot of disciplines, there are a lot of ways that you can accomplish this task. And depending on what aspect of it excites someone, that's what they will be skilled at. When you bring a team of people together, it's because different things excite different people in the team, and all of them taken together, they all converge in delivering a particular solution or proposing a particular solution. So in that sense, I agree with Donna that what we will see is we will continue to see people whose core contribution remains in the discipline that they are most passionate about, but they do come together for various projects to be part of a bigger solution. And that's why working in multidisciplinary teams will be here to stay for mobile health and for many other things. And that's why you will see that core part of this